My father told me a story once. I'll never forget it for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he ever told me as a child. It's also the story of how my grandfather died, but honestly, that isn't even the reason I remember it. You hear stories on TV, or sometimes you overhear something in a public place. People talk about ghosts and aliens, and you think to yourself, that ain't real. They're making it up, or they're mistaken, or they're crazy, or something like that. You just can't believe it. Until something happens to you. Something that brings it all together, connects the dots in a way you didn't think of before. Maybe it happens to you, maybe you hear the same story again and again, happening to different people. It doesn't take long for the world to become a lot bigger than you thought it was. As I said, this is a story my father told me, but I never believed it, even though he swore up and down it was true. It wasn't until I started clicking around the internet that I started to believe. I started to hear other stories, just like the one my father told me. It didn't take me long to believe in the rake. It's not what my father called it, of course. He's never used the internet in his life. He wouldn't know what the consensus has taken to naming it. And he chose to call it something other than it, or that thing. He called it a skinwalker, after an old Navajo tale that his grandfather told him. But I'll tell you the story the way he told it to me. We were out hunting one night, he'd tell me. Coyotes, we'd kill them for $50 a skin. They lived on a dairy farm in Ohio. They'd kill calves sometimes. We'd do it every night because we needed the money. Sometimes while we were out, we'd come on a deer and kill it. Our landlord didn't mind, and it could feed a family for a few nights and save us some money. Anyway, we were done making our rounds and heading home, walking, 'cause we didn't have a car or some four-wheeler back then. We just cut through the woods. That's when we came upon it. Blood everywhere, splattered on the trees, in the grass, in the creek, everywhere. First we figured it was a pack of coyotes. We'd seen it sometimes. They can't scavenge and start hunting deer or cattle. The worst was when they bred with feral dogs, but this wasn't like that. See, when a pack of dogs or wolves or coyotes attack something, they do it right. They'll pick off one that's weak or sick or old, or just smaller than the others, and they'll hunt it, draw it into a corner, someplace that it can't get out of, and they'll run it right to the biggest one, the alpha, and that deer will never see the alpha. It might hear it, but it won't see it. It'll just notice that its throat is gone. It'll drop dead. It's quick, and it's clean. That was not what happened there. Something had run up on a den of deer. Coyotes won't attack a den, wolves neither, because they'd get too much of a fight. There were three, I think, three bodies, torn apart. See a head here, a leg there, torso over there. Predators don't do that. They don't leave behind scraps. What had done this hadn't done it for food. It had done it for fun. But we didn't know that. Saw a bunch of carcasses and we think it's something we gotta take care of. I remember my dad telling me to go home. He thought it was a pack of feral dogs. But I wasn't leaving him, and I damn sure wasn't walking through 2 miles of woods alone, with nothing but a .22 and a pocket knife. He was only 13 at the time, so a .22 rifle was about the only gun he could reliably use. Dad had the shotgun, and I wasn't going anywhere without it. It took me a while to convince him, but finally we began tracking whatever did that. It wasn't hard either, we just followed the blood. Either that thing bled a deer before it got away, or it dragged one for a mile. I don't know. I know that I'd never seen my dad that scared before that night. Started hearing noises. I've been in a lot of woods in my life, and I've been all over the world. I've never heard noises like I heard that night. I heard things screaming. I've heard deer and fox and rabbits and raccoons and birds. Just scared. Keep in mind, it's maybe 12 or 1 o'clock even. Except the fox and some birds, nothing was supposed to be even awake. They weren't just awake, they were moving. I saw flocks of birds that night fly straight into trees, just trying to get out of there. We came up on a pack of coyotes, nearly shot a couple thinking it was what we were looking for us. Then we saw they were running towards us. They ran right past us and didn't even notice. And some deer did the same. Then some rabbits, squirrels, foxes, even a couple wild hogs. These things were supposed to be eating each other, and the only thing they cared about was getting away, or getting out of there, and away from whatever was over there. We should have put it together that maybe whatever we were tracking wasn't something we were supposed to see, and it wasn't something we could kill. I don't know why we didn't just go home. I guess we were curious. I think that was my dad's nature, to go towards trouble, to fight. Knowing what I knew about what my father did during the war, my nature was to stay close to him. We finally get into an open valley. It was normally a soy field, but it wasn't in season, so it was just flat dirt. We saw the tracks then. A lot of the animals fleeing the forest had paved over the land, but where that deer blood was, nothing had taken a single step, like they were leaving it for us to find. The tracks were shallow. Whatever it was couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, but that didn't mean much. A bobcat weighing 40 pounds soaking wet nearly tore out my damn throat once. All that means is that it's quick and it's hard to hit. So we follow the tracks, and it doesn't take us long to find where it is. There's this old schoolhouse that sits on the top of a hill. Half of it had been ripped out by a tornado, but nobody lived there anymore, not for a long time. Caught homeless people in there sometimes, or druggies looking for a safe place to shoot up. We figured maybe that was it. Maybe it was some sick kid riding a high, but we didn't think that for long. We get within 50 yards, and we hear this noise. A screeching kind of sound. It was sort of made up of two different noises. One was a high-pitched screech, another was a low-pitched growl. It was making both at the same time. We get within 20 yards, and we hear this sound. I can remember thinking that it sounded like paper being torn apart while someone was swinging water in a bucket back and forth. Dad looks at me, kneels down, and whispers, "I gotta stay behind him, 'cause we're about to corner him. Any animal will fight when it's cornered, especially if it's a predator. But we can tell by the tracks that it's just one." He tells me it's probably a single feral dog, probably rabid. Plans to sneak up on it while it's eating, shoot it, and then keep going, shooting it till it don't move no more, then slit its throat. If it gets to Dad, it's my job to shoot it or stab it to get it off of him. So he walks up and I'm right behind him, just a tad to his side, so I can see what it is, and I wish to this day that I hadn't. It was leaning over a carcass, tearing off its flesh, throws what it doesn't nibble at aside. There's blood all over the brick, glistening in the moonlight. It's pale white, human-looking, but not quite human. It had arms and legs like a human, but it sat like a monkey, hunched over. Its hands weren't normal. It had long fingers with claws at the end. So we see that, and my dad hesitates. He wasn't about to fire on a person, so he clears his throat to try to get it to turn around. And I swear to God, all the noises just ceased. Just stopped. I've never heard true silence before that, and not after that. But for 2 seconds, nothing. Nothing made any noise. Which made it all the louder when it turned around, made this shrill cry, and jumped on my dad. He got a shot off, but I think he missed. If he hit the thing, it didn't mind, but it was on him. Tears parts of him off. I start shooting it with the .22, point blank, but it barely even bled the thing. Got off 5 rounds, and then I started hitting it with the gun butt, but it wasn't even budging. It didn't even register that I was there. Clawed at my dad, taking off bits of his flesh. It started off his torso, ripping off the skin, his breast. Then it moved up, it tore off his throat, it tore off his nose, his eyes, it scalped him. And it started digging in and ripped off the bottom half of his jaw. The little bones in that tube in your neck, then his ribs. I don't exactly remember what happened, but somehow my dad's knife ends up in this thing's shoulder. My dad ends up on my back. I'm running, and by God, I'm running faster than I'd ever run before or after, and it's following me. I end up back in the woods, opposite the ones that we'd been in. heading towards my landlord's house because it's half a mile away. I can hear this thing screeching and moaning. I hear the tree branches crack and get thrown around. It sounds like someone's taking an axe to every single tree I pass. It's cracking so loud and so often, but I'm just not looking back. Finally, I trip into gravel. I look up and there's my landlord and a bunch of his buddies, drinking around a campfire. I scream and I cry and they come over. I'm telling them to call an ambulance and he looks at me, and I'll never forget what he said. "What is that on your back?" he asked me. Just as he said it, he saw one of those god-awful flannel shirts my dad wore everywhere. It was what was left of him, most of his head, his torso, but nothing after the waist. Suddenly we hear it again, screeching. He grabs me. My dad gets thrown onto the ground, or what's left of him. Fighting him, crying because I think we can still save him. Somehow, but my dad had been gone before I even picked him up. He has to pick me up and throw me inside before I come with him. He and his buddies were all inside, and they're locking doors and getting guns. The landlord's asking me, what happened? But I just don't even know what to tell him. He pieced enough of it all together to understand there was something dangerous out there. All the lights in the house are on, and someone calls the cops. They'll be here, but in 15 minutes. They look outside and see it walk in front of the fire they'd made. Don't know what it is. One of them says it looks like an ape. Suddenly something goes through the window. We shoot at it, but it's not the thing. It's my landlord's dog, but just the body, not his head or legs. We start pushing things in front of doors and windows when we hear something in the garage. I remember one of his friends saying that the doors were open. Hear metal and glass just getting ripped apart. Put a couch and a TV in front of the door to the garage. It banged around some more, but then it got quiet, but not silent like it was before. You could hear it moving around and thrashing and throwing things on the ground. Some of the guys were talking, making sure the guns were ready. Someone hands me a pistol. No sooner did I cock the hammer back did we hear something shatter upstairs. And we heard it screech again, except now it was louder. It didn't echo and fade out because it was inside. We all rushed to the one door leading upstairs, and we got to it just as that thing did. It opened it just a bit, and 4 or 5 men just slammed into it. It's got its hand through. Someone with a shotgun took care of that. Put the barrel right up to its wrist and pulled the trigger. Destroyed its hand completely. That only pissed it off, though. We started pushing on that door, clawing. We were on one side, pushing as best we could, and it was on the other, doing the same. That wood just wasn't going to hold against so much weight. Someone tells us to keep our heads down. Suddenly, the top half of the door is just gone, blown away. My ears are ringing, and there are splinters everywhere. 2 or 3 of them just unloaded on the top of that door. I don't really know where it went after that. The police got there. I was still glued to that door. What was left of it? The sun was up before they got me off it. They put me in a hospital for a while. A lot of people talked to me, but I didn't talk back. Not for a long time. When I got home, I got a job from the landlord, working on the farm. We didn't talk much, not about the thing, but I signed up for the army when I was 19. He sat me down to drink some scotch as a send-off. I asked him right away what the police told him. The story they went with was a wild animal, probably a wolf or maybe a bear that had migrated north. I asked him how they could say that when they had the hand. He looks at me stunned. Tells me that hand never made it back to the station. The cop who had it in his car wrecked, drove into a tree and died on impact. The hand was never found, probably taken away by an animal. The cops, when they would acknowledge the hand existed at all, said it was simply the paw of a bear that looked like a human hand. I never talked to the landlord again. He went missing when I was in basic, and the cops never found him. He said he owed some people money and just ran away, but I don't think it's that simple. I never went back to those woods. I wouldn't even if I had the whole goddamn U.S. Army at my back. But that was a lie. When my mother died, I don't think my father felt he had anything left, that he might as well settle old scores. He went to those woods, and he never came back. The FBI was called. They did a show for everyone involved, but I knew they weren't really looking. Had to get one drunk and slip him a few 50s before he finally told me that they get a few calls about those woods every year, about someone up and vanishing, but that was all he wanted to tell me. Before he got up and left with the rest of his team, he wrote "The Rake" onto a napkin. I didn't know what it meant until I searched for it on the internet. Honestly, I would have rather not known. Christ, I muttered to myself. As the first flakes of snow started to fall, they gathered in fuzzy clumps over the windshield before my wipers cleared them away. I'd been waiting for 20 minutes now in my sister's driveway. Had I chosen to wait inside with her, I'd been dead by now thanks to her 2 gray cats. Cute little devils, but murder to my sinuses. Puffy eyes and a clogged up throat is just what I need. Every Christmas, our family made the annual trip to my grandparents' cabin tucked away in the woods of Hope, Alaska, and I had hoped to beat the heavy snowfall that was forecasted. Since my sister's license was suspended from a DUI, here I was, a hostage to time, with my finger tapping anxiously on the steering wheel. When my mother had asked me to be the one to grab my sister, I'd honestly dreaded it from the start. It wasn't that we hated one another, we just weren't as close anymore. After decades of constant arguments and bitter disagreements, we became distant and our relationship fizzled. Yes, we were siblings, but it felt more accurate to call us the residue of what siblings once were. Finally, like the gates of Valhalla, her front door opened and out she came. Her hair was forest green the last time I'd seen her. It had been white. The time before that, it was violet. "Got everything?" I asked, as she clambered her way into the passenger seat. She responded. She adjusted her glasses and stuffed a few things in the back seat. Just like that, we were off. Hope was about a 30-minute drive, and it didn't take long for the awkward silence to inflate between us. It didn't help that the radio didn't work in my car, and that the broken auxiliary port made your music sound like it was having a seizure. By the time we reached the turnoff for Hope Highway, the road was turning into a thick white sheet. Thankfully, on Christmas Eve night, the long stretch to Hope's small community was quick and vacant. The cabin was tucked away in a fortress of trees 5 miles off the main road. As I made the turn, my sister cracked a window, pulled out a blunt and lit it with her lighter. "Want a hit?" she asked. Snow crunched beneath us. "Not while I'm driving." "It's a straight path. We're practically there already." She took a drag and blew it out the window. "I just want to focus on this, all right?" She huffed and pushed up her glasses. "If you're that worried, maybe slow down a bit then." There was the jab. Piece of bait to lure me into another fight, but I wasn't gonna bite. Not this time. She could live with us getting there faster. The drive was almost over, and soon I'd be in a warm living room with my feet up, spiked eggnog in my hand, and Bobby Helm's Jingle Bell Rock in the Bear. I could already hear Uncle Jed spouting off one of his crude jokes. "Why does Santa Claus have such a big—" "Dude!" my sister shrieked, jabbing a finger in my side and whipping my mind back to the windshield. The car just finished winding around the thick trail. The large body of a reindeer stood in our path, eyes wide open and blank. It didn't move as the high beams found it. Snapped into a panic, I twisted the wheels in a desperate swerve. The car veered greasily to the side in a fine spray of slosh. The reindeer, also known as a caribou, remained still even as the bumper soared inches from its nose. It came to a crunching halt off the main path. "Jesus," I sighed, blessed with relief. "Did we hit it?" "No," my sister said, leaning out the window to check while exhaling another plume of smoke. I wound the steering wheel back around and pressed on the gas. The wheels shrilled in place, kicking up glogs of sleet, but not moving an inch. "Perfect," I moaned, and unfolded myself from the seat to check it out. The 2 front tires were caked in a black slush and practically swallowed in a mound of snow. I kicked at it, trying to clear off the icy debris from the treads and beneath the wheel well. When that tired me out, I resorted to scraping it off with my fingers. "Screw off, Prancer," I heard my sister call toward the dark silhouette of the reindeer. Its antlers looked like gnarled fingers reaching high for the treetops. when she made a sort of startled yelp, followed by a, "What the fuck?" I looked up from the scrim of snow, and the reindeer was now standing tall on both of its hind legs. It looked strange, like a caricature you'd see in a kid's book. But out there, in the silence of the woods, it was a creepy image. The way its vague shape stood on just two legs held an almost human-like balance. For whatever reason, I realized then that it didn't have a tail. Its muscular neck craned to the side and let out an undulating scream, a miserable squeal of metal grinding against metal. My legs were ice sculptures, cementing me to the spot as the shriek quieted to a succession of wet grunts. The reindeer dropped down to its original posture and stomped heavily. Puffs of white vapor and strings of snot vented from its nostrils. I was no hunter, but it didn't take a lot to tell when a pissed-off animal was about to charge. I leaped for the driver's seat, pulled the door open, and slammed it shut just as the muffled thud of hooves reached me. Antlers scraped the door as its large body practically flew over the patch I'd just been standing in. Fast. Really fast. My sister screamed as the large bulk of its frame wound back around and charged again, this time shattering the headlights and submerging us in darkness. "Just go already!" my sister hollered in my ear. "I'm trying, goddammit!" I hissed. The wheels continued to spin helplessly. We were trapped here. The creature charged again, this time nailing the window. A cobweb of cracks bloomed near my sister's head. I searched for anything, literally anything, that I could use as a weapon. I was never really a gun enthusiast, but at that moment I'd have shaved my head and joined the secular monks if it meant having a Glock in my hand right then and there. After rattling the car more, the reindeer finally appeared to lose interest and disappeared amidst the cluster of trees. Granted some time to breathe and think, we phoned our dad and told him about the situation. He was going to come down in his pickup and get us unstuck and out of this mess. I looked over at my sister, who was taking long and steady breaths between her fingers. "Are you alright?" I asked. "What do you think? I told you to slow down." Another jab, and this time I wasn't gonna have it. "You want to be useful? Get out there and push. No? Then shut the hell up. I don't need it right now." She said nothing else, and neither did I, returning once again to the pocket of silence that our relationship had succumbed to. Sooner Dad's headlights peaked in the distance, the better. Suddenly, she rolled the window down. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Shh," she pursed her lips. "Just listen." Humoring her, I waited, and sure enough, the sound reached me too. Quiet voice of a little girl coming from outside. "Somebody," it whimpered. "I'm lost. Please help me. I'm lost." Sister unlocked the door and motioned to open it. I grabbed her wrist. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "There's someone out there." "Just wait a second. It's weird, isn't it?" The voice continued to whine, choking between sobs and pleading for someone, anyone, to help her. I didn't like the way it sounded. The same lasting drawl between words, the same weeping sounds, like someone was hitting repeat on a speaker. Something wasn't right, and my instincts were hoisting red flags left and right. Then my sister looked at me, and her expression warped into shock. She flung back, pitting both shoulders against the interior. Things that sounded like words bubble up, but didn't quite make it out of her throat. I turned and saw what was looking at me. It had the face of a man surrounded by the mottled fur of a caribou's body. Skin was a mummified brown color wound tightly around its long skull like old crinkled leather. Snowflakes landed upon its wide, expressionless eyes and melted into the dark membranes of its pupils. It circled the car, bobbing its antlers and fogging up the windows as it peered inside. My heart shook the walls of my throat. I locked eyes with my sister, unable to say anything behind the sheer disbelief. Should have grabbed my phone, snapped a photo, recorded a video, anything, but my thoughts were constrained. Then let out that same horrible scream, but I didn't see its tight, contorted lips open. The sound was coming from its neck. Small, fleshy orifices flapping open like mouths were converting the high-pitched shrill into the mimicked cry of a little girl. "Help me. I'm lost. Help me. Headlights glazed the area. My father's pickup came into view, paving its way down the path. The reindeer, or whatever the fuck it was, ran off, vanishing once again into the snow-covered thicket. Nobody believed us. Why would they? If anybody had told me that story, I would have assumed they were hopped up on some crazy psychedelic. But the reality of what I saw was cold. It's something I still to this day can't fully understand. Instead of sleeping that night, my sister and I did some research that led us to the myth of skinwalkers. Beings of some sort, capable of mimicking voices and disguising themselves as animals to lure people into the woods. After reading other accounts, there wasn't a doubt in my mind about what we'd witnessed out there. Every so often that night, I'd stare out the window and eye the yard, wondering if I'd see that leathery face watching from the tree line. Neither I nor my sister ever made that trip again, much to the frustration of my family, but there was a silver lining. She and I have never been closer.